Let's see first of all how quick and easy motion retargeting is with RHiggit 2. Here we have a basic skeleton which has a piece of motion capture applied to it here. The first thing we want to do, of course, is to get this and a RHiggit rig together. So one way or the other we do a load from scene to get them both into the scene together. So there we go, mocap character and a RHiggit rig together in the scene. The retargeting tools can then be found here on the animation toolbox, and we have two tools to use. The first is to define our source character, so we open that up and we add an appropriate assignment for them. With all of their mapping done, we can give them a name, for instance here Bill, and we'll be told that they were successfully mapped. We can then OK that, go to the apply motion. We then get the retarget options where we can choose a source character, in this case Bill, a target character, in this case Bob, which is the rig we brought in, and a frame range over which we wish to transfer motion. We click OK, and in the short space of just a few seconds, we get a fully retargeted motion. And there it is. Our motion has retargeted over to our RHiggit rig. This has keyed the mocap onto the rig control items, so we're free to come in and start editing straight away on our rig, and it all just works cleanly and smoothly. And as we can see, we get a pretty good retarget result there. Straightforward, simple to use, and nice and easy to edit and start cleaning up. Of course, like other areas of RHiggit, this simplicity and ease of use comes with a lot of options and functionality included. So here we'll guide you through all of that with a look at some more specific examples and setting them up. The first thing to consider is the source motion. This retargeter will work with pretty much any animated hierarchy. Most commonly that's going to be bones, something like BVH or an FBX. But this could be a hierarchy of nulls, it could be a hierarchy of cameras, it could be a mixture of them. None of that matters. All that you need is an animated hierarchy, which has come from somewhere. This hierarchy must have an identifiable top root, which would be analogous to the main root on any RHiggit rig. In the case of this character, that's the hips joint there. The target rig then can be any RHiggit generated rig. In this simple example, we've just used the basic human biped, but you can broadly match any RHiggit rig to any input source. And this works best when the anatomies are at least broadly matched somehow. To demonstrate this then, we shall use our ever faithful T-Rex and show how we can get a motion across in a fashion like this. The first thing to concern ourselves with is the base pose. Retargeting compares things at base pose in order to determine the size and space of things. Now we see of course that both in our source character and our original RHiggit character there, both just have this rigid T-pose, and consequently they match and map up together very well. T-Rex doesn't, so we're going to correct for this. You don't, however, want to do it by putting him or the thing into the exact same pose as one another. You want to put them in the same relative pose as one another. So let's observe that on our source motion here, at his T-pose on frame 0, and notice this must always happen at frame 0. The arrangement of your relative poses must. We can see that at this point he is in a rigid straight up T-pose. If we look at him in frame 1, then his spine has slouched forward somewhat. So this slightly curved down pose is sort of his restful median pose, if you will, throughout the animation. So this is a bolt upright pose for him. So let's do the same with T-Rex. Let's put him in an equivocal bolt upright T-Rex pose, in which case we'll get his spine just up like this, his neck up by a small scotch, get his head of course pointing completely flat forwards like this. So you notice he's not upright, he's just upright T-Rex. Next we see what else differs. Well, there's the arms of course. What I'm going to do for this instance is I'm actually going to take the source motion arms and rotate them both downwards, much like this, and set them on an angle to match that of T-Rex. So there we go, we have this broadly matched pose between the two of them. I could also of course offset the legs. His legs aren't bolt outright straight like this fellow's, but when they are standing normally, T-Rexes don't stand with very erect legs anyway, so we don't want that to be the base, so we do want him down more like this. Perhaps just give him a small lift like that. With the base poses set, one important thing that you will have to do is to ensure that your rig is fully keyed into this pose. It depends what control systems the different rig parts are or are not using, but just to be safe, you should either get the entire rig selection in the animation toolbox and keyframe the entire rig at 0. Or alternatively, you can just use a regular key, all items. This ensures that anything that's caught by motion modifiers gets an actual keyframe update in the base pose. What you also want to pay attention to are the control systems that exist on your rig and what kind of retarget will be performed. This is most important for limbs and relates to the IK and the FK settings. If a rig has only FK, which is what we saw in our original example of Bob, at least with his arms, then we just get an FK bake and an FK retarget. What can often provide more pleasing results is an IK bake, especially when crossing over anatomies like this, and for that you can use the limbs in either IK mode or IK FK mode. To give yourself the full range of editing options later on, IK FK is preferred, and on our T-Rex here we see that I've got always on IK only legs, whilst I have IK FK arms here. If you are using IK on your limbs for your retargeting, it is important that you also turn the IK on by setting the switches to 1, so that the retargeting is performed properly onto the IK system. Another very helpful thing to do when using IK for retargeting is to push the poles out from their initial parent axis positions. This is done so that when you have an IK limb, it has room to move around without crossing its pole line very easily, and thus performing flips during retargeting. This is especially helpful when there is a mismatch in proportionality or anatomy between source and target characters. With all of the settings taken care of for our target character, let's look at our source character. You create a source character by choosing the root, or in this case hips item, that which is at the top of the hierarchy and is analogous to the main root in a RHiggit rig. Select this item and go into Define Map. Straight away you can notice that that item there has been tagged as the main root, and you have all of the other items in its hierarchy which you can tag to different RHiggit parts. The targets are listed over here, and these follow the standard RHiggit naming conventions for parts. In some cases the retargeter wants a specific joint reference, in other cases it uses a specific part reference. First of all, let's clear some rubbish here. This source rig has got standard FBX naming on it, but it's got additional little bones thrown into the hierarchy there where it's come from a different use. We don't need to see those, so I can start selecting them. Things like the spine and leg offsets. These other additional offsets and end bones here. So like that, selecting items you don't require in your map, you can just click remove from map and they will go away. Obviously, this is about matching up names to named parts. You should know the source rig and of course where the points of rotation are and where the keyframes are. And you should keep an eye on which name relates to which anatomical bit. For instance, here in FBX, the item named left shoulder is the left clavicle. That of course in RHiggit is the shoulder girdle. So you select your source item, your target destination, and you set mapping. The left arm in FBX is the actual pivot point at the top of the humerus, the upper arm. In RHiggit we call that the shoulder. So we set that again on left, set mapping. Left arm roll I've left in there, I haven't cleared. No need for inclusion tool. All we need is the actual main points that are listed in RHiggit. So that means that the forearm gets the elbow and the hand gets the wrist. And the same goes through for others. The neck, of course, gets the neck, the same for the right side, and so on. When it comes to other areas, like the spine, this will map as a full part. What we have here in our FBX rig are 4 spine joints: spine, spine 1, spine 2, and spine 3. What we want to do is to select all 4 of those. Select the spine and set mapping. And those will all map as a single part like that. We see this again where we have the area for finger mapping. This is another reason when you're building your RHiggit rigs to keep them ordered. That is to try and keep making parts with the same numbers in roughly the same sort of places so as they can all correspond to one another. The common convention on adding fingers to the hand is for them to be named finger and starting from the thumb go 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 through to the pinky. So in this case we would select the thumb 1, 2 and 3 together from the source character, choose the finger target and set mapping. We would then find the index 1, 2 and 3, also finger left, set mapping, they become left finger 2. And like this you can work through a source skeleton and map any part to any appropriate RHiggit part. You don't always have to map full characters. If you're just wanting to grab some leg motion from something, you could just create the map for the legs, the rest would be ignored. When you are done, you give it a name, and you're told that your character is successfully mapped. Of course, once you've created a mapping for a skeleton that is named a certain way, you may have multiple copies of that skeleton with different motions. You can simply save a preset file so that you can reload the mapping onto other skeletons with different motions. And similarly, rather than doing any mapping, you can just load a preset, and in this case for Bill here, he fits the FBX preset just like that. Once you have finished mapping a character, you click OK. And from this point, once you have a source skeleton defined in the scene, once you have a target character, a RHiggit rig in the scene, you can click Apply Motion, and you get the retarget dialog. We see that our source character there is going to be Bill, our target is going to be Rex, we have our frame range 1 to 350, and we click OK. And there we have it. A few seconds later, we have our retargeted motion onto the Rex, and we can see that works really quite nicely there. Let us see then exactly what has been keyed. We can notice that root items, like of course the main root here, IK goals and so on, are all keyed in. Those limbs that were on IK have received IK retargeting on their control systems. Same here for the IK FK arms. Other areas like the spine, neck, head, which just in FK have of course received FK keyframes. This has given us a pretty nice and smooth outcome overall, especially with the limbs, they're very clean. If we take a view of the spine from above, then we can see that the main spine has a bit of curve to it. The neck unfortunately doesn't, because of course there was only a single spine joint in the source skeleton. Something which is important here to be aware of with the retargeter is what it will retarget to. Of course, having the limbs in IK mode meant that it would retarget to them in IK. We've seen how FK only limbs will get a basic FK retarget. But these other systems like spines that do of course have different control methods will also get retargeted according to their control method. Ordinarily you would set this up in advance, but this Rex is still editable, it's got all of its parts. As such, we can come and do an edit part, and we'll take the spine over to, let's say, handles control. Once we set selected there, what we see is that the handle has appeared and has taken control there. But if we look at its curves, we see that of course it's also been baked during the whole retargeting process, simply because it was present. So that means that we can do a retarget onto a handle-based system for a body part if we like. And this still gives us the same smooth movement in the upper spine there, but now it's fully distributed over all of the spine joints via the handle mechanism. Notice of course that because the handle wasn't preset, it wasn't posed up into the T-Rex upright posture, it is sagging further down. Its base pose was effectively sagged down when it was bound to the target skeleton. In a case like this, it was mostly pitch, so if we were wanting to use that, we could just come to the pitch channel here, select the entire key block and move them up or down in the graph as appropriate to start him out in his raised up position like this. And now we get a retarget on that controller, which is much more similar to our original FK retarget. So when you are retargeting rigs, note how you can use different control items to spread the distributions of systems like spines and fingers, which function as a whole part. Similarly here, I have selected the Flexi IK control for his neck and the world space control for the head, which keeps the head oriented in a given space irrespective of what the body is doing. The IK is a nice control method for a neck on a character such as this, and the targeted orientation of the head is also helpful for this kind of creature. I'm also going to give the overall pitch of that neck control there a bit of a dip to push into a more reasonable shape, and similarly for the world head, just to dip it down, that little scotch there. Viewed from above, we can see this gives a nice serpentine motion to our neck there that we were lacking before, and the head is also holding nice and true to form. We can also see the shaping that we're getting held in our neck there. So our edits can be something as simple as this, choosing different control systems which to retarget onto, exploiting the distributed control methods that they bring. To do more, we'll want to start operating on the controls of the character, and the first thing really to mention there is the style of keying that's been used on the controllers. One of the things that RHiggit rigs allow for is different ways of interpreting the controls, using more, using fewer, putting rotation on different parts. And some of this comes down to keyframe management, and we see in the guides for the different limbs and body parts what actually manipulating their controllers does. The style in which you put them together tends to vary animator by animator. When you retarget onto a control rig like this, then the retargeter does use a particular keying style on the controller set. Used in hand animation, it can be liked by some, not by others. Here it's the most efficient way of doing quick adjustments on the rig. Any sort of scene level root item, that is at the top level of the character, such as the main root, the main IKG controls for legs and arms, all the things that work independently of one another at the top level in the hierarchy. All of those are following position only. Their retarget was a positional retarget. In every case it's their immediate child, the offset, which has the rotational animation applied. You can see the same on the feet here, where the IK main goal is remaining flat the whole time, and the rotation for the foot is coming from the offset controls. The reason that this is done is because it gives easy, quick positional offsetting. So if you decide that you want the whole character to raise up and down, or you want to gradually bob him up and down, then you can use the offset here, as though it was some manner of layered controller, to change the hip height, thus, and when it animates, the rotation will still come from this same point. Were its parent getting the rotation, then when you try to offset motions like this, you would of course have an orbit effect going on. As such, with the IK arms here, the rotation is all on the offsets. So if I were to perhaps try and just get the IK something like this, begin putting the arms into more of a T-Rex-like pose, offset from the main IK goals. And there we go, with a little adjustment on the offset position there, we get something that's still not quite right, but it's starting to look a bit more like Rex. Another place that's good to offset like this for this character is on the feet here. T-Rexes would have walked with their feet a little more overlapping the first couple of toes. So we can watch where the foot lands under the body here and give it just a little nudge to the side like that. And we'll have the same on the other foot there. Just nudge that over a scotch. And what we get is this more in-line walking here, which is more characteristic of this kind of creature, just with a simple offset on the offsets there. And what we get from all this is something that's starting to look much more T-Rex-like already. Still a ways to go, but it's pretty good so far. And so altogether that pretty much represents the entirety of the retargeting system. Everything from how source characters are treated, how you create references to target characters, and how the subsequent retargeting is baked onto the rig controllers and how that translates into the basics of the way that the controls are used for animation generally. From here there's a whole bunch of additional stuff that we can do. Added cleanup, added animation over the top, to improve and polish our mocap. And whilst that's a topic for the mocap and retargeting toolset, it's also the same topic as hand animation on the rigs, and it's all about rig interaction, control management, where you place your keyframes. Because it's all on the same rig, the only meaningful difference at this point is the key density. With this in mind, we'll leave this here, and see instead a whole bunch of the stuff that we could do going further to refine this animation in a later video, which will be focused overall more on general rig animation workflow.